Hello and welcome to this short feature presenting some highlights of a workshop held in May 2013 at the University of British Columbia in Canada. My name is Jim Anderson and I am a professor in the Department of Language and Literacy Education at UBC. I was one of the organizers of this workshop along with colleagues Drs. Ann Anderson, Jan Hare, and Marianne McTavish, and graduate students Nikki Friedrich, Jian Kim, Sylvia McClellan, Tess Prendergast, Harini Rajagopal, and Laura T-Shirt. The workshop was funded by the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, the Department of Language and Literacy Education, and the Faculty of Education at UBC. Titled The Intersection of Language, Learning, and Culture in Early Childhood, it brought together international scholars across a range of disciplines working on this topic across the contexts of home, school, and community settings. Over the 3 days of the workshop, invited participants engaged with problematizing some of the current discourse about teaching, learning, and development in the early years.
Paper where she actually says to me in her own way that my Spanish is so immense, but my English is this big, and she's frustrated by that because she wants full access and be able to go back and forth, but she's aware of where she's at.
But the cultural worker also saw a bigger problem in that the 15-year-old kids couldn't talk to their parents because they had lost Vietnamese. And then the parents couldn't communicate very well with the 15-year-olds because they had not learned English. Most of the parents that we work with in the Vietnamese community, these were mushroom farmers and so forth, and they worked long hours and they did not have access.
If you look at the trajectory of Asian second generation language shift, quickly I see children lose their first language as fast as 6 months. So a lot of them, we call them that involuntary language loss. It's not that they don't value it, it's just they don't have the language environment that support that kind of maintenance. And that's happening in early literacy as well. So.
Really part of what their everyday teaching is, and that it's not something, like May isn't Haida Month, for instance, which was a practice in the past, that, in May we'll do Haida Month, and the rest of the year we'll do the other things.
In addition to discussing assumptions and issues in the field, the focus of the workshop was to share research and ideas on innovative teaching, learning, and development.
And what we were doing here was we were relating a mathematical activity to a traditional story. And the story was one of the Haida creation stories about the raven who discovers the first humans inside a clamshell. So we had the children figure out how many of them might fit into the clamshell and figure out what they could do with their bodies to make more space, and so that was a lesson on fractions. And then we took some children out, the raven discovered them and they were out of the clamshell, and then did some other talking about, well, how many children were there originally, how many are left,
that more than the 4 F's of multiculturalism, food, fun, festivals, whatever, really, as a critical multiculturalist, the thing that I took away most in this project was how power works, but moreover, how sensitive we have to be about how power works. When we are talking about someone's child in front of them, depicting them, positioning them, and the culture and language in which they're coming from. Because that's when I think the big D comes through, right? The deficiency markers that then change how home literacy practices and events are organized or no longer organized. How sense of self is developed or no longer developed. Because success is a huge motivator in how people are going to operate. Because they'll tell you very clearly, right? I love my child and I want them to succeed. What's given up after these relations of power have manifested is really what the sense of loss. And that's what I tried to document in the work.
And so then that gets me a little bit to thinking about, well, they see themselves as doing good. So what would change my mind about my good if I thought I was really doing good? I would have to have somehow presentation of some data to me that would cause me create enough dissonance in me to make me want to revisit something. And so, and as I listen to you, I'm thinking of all this beautiful data you already have that creates all this dissonance.
While the workshop broadly focused on cultural context in early childhood, some of the specific themes included family and home contexts, indigenous pedagogies and ways of learning, and mathematics education.
What's the language behind it? What scaffolding is behind it? How much attention is brought to the print? How much do the parents talk about the pictures? You know, and a lot of that is inconclusive about the literature. So it really is interesting to me the kind of how you could sort of explore this in a different way.
And it's actually a research project. The research project had 3 questions. And the first question was, what makes a Hamish child Hamish? The second question was, well, how do they learn these things? And then the third question, because it was a Head Start sponsored project, how does Head Start help or not help in the process of becoming Hamish?
So from those conversations, I started to look at them in light of Indigenous pedagogy. So what's really happening? You know, how is it that learning practices and processes are transmitting Indigenous, or are processes that transmit a system of knowledge, really, I guess, reflecting Indigenous ways of knowing across the generations. And that's how I was really thinking about Indigenous pedagogies. And so looked at their conversations to try and identify Indigenous pedagogies. So also looked at the literature on Aboriginal education, early childhood, and also quite broadly in Indigenous contexts, and identified probably 7 kinds of pedagogies that inform or transmit Indigenous knowledge.
And so like when you think of math and mathematizing the world, as long as you're dealing with quantity and space, which you cannot do if you cannot not do, but that's not what that word conjures for them. What that word brings up for them is, the worksheets and the things that sort of, victimize them, if you will, in terms of the subject in school. So then when they think about, oh, I'm not doing that to my child. But yeah, they sort laundry. There's lots of things where they actually do a tremendous amount of work in mathematics with their children.
3 plenary sessions featuring Dr. Karen Merton from Griffith University in Australia, Professor Eve Gregory from Goldsmiths College in London, and Professor Terenzina Nunes from the University of Oxford oriented the papers and discussion over the 2 days. We invite you to view their sessions that are available online on this website. We are currently working with workshop participants to gather material for a book that furthers the work presented at the workshop on the interrelationship of culture, language, and learning and the needs of all young children.